What's good, folks, family, friends, loved ones, enemies, frenemies, wizards, witches, muggles, mudbloods, people of Middle Earth to another episode of Disguise Coverage, the only podcast in existence that gives you an equal amount of blueberries in each muffin, and that is presented by the best pizza in Buffalo, New York, and that is One Pie Pizza. You can find the online menu in the episode show notes, whether here on YouTube and or whichever podcasting app or platform you are listening to this show on. I am your host, Anthony Prohaska. Find me on Twitter at pro__Ant. That's pro two underscores ANT. In tonight's episode, man, we're just right where we thought we'd be after week one, right? Just cruising on a full swing of sadness and depression after a pretty deflating and unfortunate loss to the New York Jets, an Aaron Rodgers-less Jets on Monday night in New Jersey, not New York, New Jersey. We're going to dive into that a little bit on this show, not to rehash too much, but stock up, stock down. It's a part of the show that I'd love to incorporate come regular season time. So we're going to dive into that piece, who and or what schematically, individual player related, position group related, who and or what is trending up, trending down, the whys and the hows behind all of it. Then as we move forward, we're going to look forward and move forward towards week two as the Buffalo Bills face the Las Vegas Raiders as the home opening contest for the Buffalo Bills in 2023. And we're going to dive into the schematic components, the key schematic components that will decide that game. Again, X's and O's, player pieces, advanced metrics, all from a bunch of film study. I was granted a whole bunch of Raiders tape today, offensively and defensively from their week one performance against the Denver Broncos, really trying to piece together who and what this team is. Although, again, 1 week isn't the biggest sample size you can really draw too many conclusions from. But given the history of this team, what they were last year, Josh McDaniels, all of those pieces, we're going to dive into that from a matchup standpoint for Bills and Raiders in week two. But like I mentioned in the intro, the intro of the intro, I want to grab some pieces from the live chat. So I mentioned it earlier, commented on YouTube, but if you're just joining in now, thoughts, questions, comments, concerns, anything and everything related to the takeaways from Bills versus Jets. I've got several, again, all related to the stock up and stock down pieces. So if you have a question, if you have a thought, if you have a concern, if you have a comment, whatever is on your brain, if you have some stock up and stock down of your own, whether you think they're obvious, whether you think they're not, throw them up into the chat. I like to make this as interactive as possible, especially on these episodes where I ride solo. Like to have as large and engaging of a chat back and forth with each other and back and forth with myself as we move on forward in this episode. And grab the first comment. Actually, question from Rod, who said, "How did the rookies, first year and second guys look? Bright future? Question mark." We'll start with the offensive side. I thought Osiris Torrance held his own. I think a couple reps he'd like to have back, but I think that's kind of systematic of the entire offensive line from this past game, which I think is also systematic of playing against the New York Jets, a group that, if anybody was still doubting the New York Jets defense, whether it was their defensive line, whether it was their coverage, whether it was the scheme, anything and everything, if you were still doubting the Jets defense for whatever reason, I hope this game shed some light on how much of a quality unit they are from front to back. And we're going to talk about that as we move forward in this episode, but it starts with that defensive line quality group. I thought Torrance held his own. I really wish he would have been able to seal Quinnen Williams on that 2nd and 15 run in overtime as he pinned down on him. Williams read it, got through him, made a play on Cook, along with JFM, John Franklin Myers, making a play on Cook as well, getting through Spencer Brown. So that's one he'd like to have back, and a couple in pass pro, but I thought Torrance held his own for the most part. Continuing with first and second year players, I got to fully go through defense again, but I saw Terrell Bernard getting a lot of hate during the game last night. I'm assuming it was because, based on what was happening on the timeline with real time within the game, I'm guessing a lot of people were putting the blame on his shoulders for those big Breece Hall runs. I don't think that was necessarily the case, but I thought Bernard on the whole, for being his second start ever, his first start coming last year against the New York Jets in New Jersey. I thought he played adequately. I liked what Christian Benford did in coverage, although everything coverage related, I think we do have to kind of take with a grain of salt with it having that caveat of, only 4 plays against Aaron Rodgers and the rest coming against Zach Wilson, who isn't the most polished passer, although they did look good from a coverage standpoint against Rodgers. Those are like really the highlights from like a young guy perspective. For me, I liked what Cook offered from a speed standpoint. I think, despite the fact that the run game, for me at least, wasn't necessarily everything that I wanted it to be in the first game, I think you did see what his speed offers, what a running back with more juice and more electricity out of the backfield, whether in the passing game or in the run game, what that affords this offense from a matchup standpoint and a schematic standpoint. He had a couple of runs where, being able to bounce it outside or hit the hole quickly because he has that giddy up naturally in his game. I think that made a big difference early on for the Bills. I think it'll continue to pay dividends as the season goes forward. But I thought Cook looked good as well, in addition to some other players and pieces. But yeah, I thought that was there. Thomas got into the chat early and went on a string of comments, but all with kind of the central theme. So Thomas saying, would people be happy with an 11-6 wild card team that wins the Super Bowl? Slow start with a strong finish is my preference. Just saying ... I think anybody would be happy with the Super Bowl. I'll speak for myself, and I think I would speak for everybody. I don't care how it gets done. If you're any team that's trying to win a championship, who cares if you start out hot or start out slow, or if you run the table the whole way, or peak at, 3/4 of the way versus the end of the year? Your goal is to win a championship. If you win the championship, who cares how you got there? The ends justify the means. This is Karl Marx at its finest right here. If you win a Super Bowl, everything else is irrelevant. Who cares the path that you got there, what teams you beat, what your regular season looked like, what your road to the Super Bowl looked like? Who cares? If you can win a Super Bowl, you win a championship, you take it. You take it and run. It does not matter how it comes or what circumstances it comes under. I got to stop because I see a super chat. Oh, Jason, appreciate you being here. And thank you very much for the super chat. Appreciate you. Jason's comment says, Josh's second half turnovers are skewing all objective analysis of this game. The questions we had going in were answered in a more positive way than a negative way. We just didn't expect Josh to do that. Laugh out loud. I think that's a very fair point. So I like this comment. It's related to part of my stock up, stock down going forward. Josh Allen is in there. You can guess whether he's stock up or stock down. I feel like it's pretty obvious. But I think to Jason's point, there are certain pieces that are tied to the emotional aspect from a fan perspective that I think often overshadow the larger perspective from a schematic and structural standpoint. I think whether positively or especially negatively, whenever a team loses a game, especially for the Buffalo Bills, because this fan base is so scarred, no matter how much success will happen going forward, those wounds will never fully heal. I say this as, and maybe I'm just speaking for myself, those of you who are regular watchers, listeners, viewers know that I'm a very big Boston Red Sox fan. I have been lucky enough to witness several Red Sox World Series in my lifetime, something I genuinely never thought would happen, especially after 2003, the Aaron Boone walk-off. My spirit, my soul was crushed. I saw the Sox win the next year in 2004, in 2007, 2013, 2018. I've seen multiple World Series. I'm still super scarred about the Aaron Boone walk-off. I'm still scarred about them losing to Cleveland in the late 90s and early 2000s and all of those series where I felt like the Sox could have done something more. I'm still upset about them losing to Tampa Bay in the ALCS in 2008, Dustin Pedroia's MVP season. So even though you have the success, those wounds will always be there. And I think for Bills fans, when negative things happen, especially something that's severe, like the negatives we saw last night with how disappointing and deflating that loss was, you try to channel that disappointment and that anger. And I think it tends to go into a couple pieces, whether they're scapegoats or lightning rods or conduits for that emotion. And yeah, I think to Jason's point here, there were several positives offensively and defensively in this game, but those negatives happen and everybody focuses on them and drills down on them, similar to sometimes the positive pieces, right? I think coming away from that 13 seconds performance, everybody was so geeked up on the Bills offense and geeked down, I guess, on the 13 seconds performance, that was all that was dominating everything. And there were a lot of structural components that were getting overlooked. But I like this comment from Jason. I appreciate the super chat. Appreciate you being here. And this is going to tie into some of my stock up, stock down as we go forward. I'm going to scroll back up to the chat. I like this comment here from Joe underneath Jason's. Joe, I appreciate you being here. And Joe saying, I am sad. I feel you. Not great. So Thomas's comment here, yeah, I want to circle back. Yeah, I think people would be happy with the Super Bowl no matter how it comes. And then Thomas putting down again, saying we need to peak in January, plain and simple. I like the comment here from Carl saying, how about we peak in February, specifically on the 11th in Vegas? Oh, RJ coming in and saying, I thought we would be 11-6 before last night. Now I don't know if that's possible. Yeah, I can understand the trepidation going forward. The Bills had a tough, and also I think take this with a grain of salt. Strength of schedule before the season starts is obviously based on the previous year's record, which is not necessarily indicative of who or what a team is going to be in the current season. So whether you are better, whether you are worse, there's so many pieces that go into that strength of schedule piece that isn't really relevant to the current season, but based on previous year's records and who the Bills are matched up against from a team perspective on their schedule, yeah, their schedule looks rough. I know what happened to the Giants and wasn't great in week one, but they got to play the NFC East. I don't think the Giants will be an easy out. You've got Dallas, you've got Philly, you've got Kansas City, I know the Chargers chargered this past week, but you've got the Chargers. Like, you've got to face the Jets again. The Pats aren't going to be easy out. That's twice. Miami, unfortunately, I think I've been higher on Miami than most in the Bills community. I think Tua and Mike McDaniel continue to prove a lot of people wrong. Granted, they have some tremendous skill pieces, but not even to go through the whole schedule yet. Like, the Bills have a pretty heavy murderer's row from a schedule perspective this year in 2023. So, yeah, we're gonna see what happens. We're gonna see what happens. Carl saying, "Hey, Ant, think about who actually came out on top last night. We have an L, but a healthy QB. Jets got the W and a snapped Achilles. I'll take that L every time and twice on Sundays." That's fair. That's fair. Roy saying, looks like the tree took the loss really well. Yeah, the tree is in its splendor. Still have it rocking, Bills colors for the opening of the season. I will be changing it over to a Halloween themed October tree once October hits, of course, but we're still in September. I was going to do some fall theme, but I figured, rock the Bills colors, opening week in the NFL, opening month, really. So that's where we are. Jason with some perspective saying it was week one. We lost to a team we thought we probably would split with. Week one is always crazy and we didn't have any devastating injuries. It's all in front of us. I think that's a fair perspective as well. Whether you win or you lose, in whatever fashion you win or lose in, who you are in week one is never holistically indicative of who you are going to be at the end of the year. And in relating that to Thomas's comment earlier, you want to be peaking in November, December, January. So I actually juxtapose that with the 2023 Bills. I think the 2023 Bills started out guns blazing. And then as the season kind of progressed on, they became a little inefficient in some areas. Some of that obviously due to the Josh Allen elbow piece. Some of that due to other decision-making pieces for Josh Allen, which I'm going to talk about as we go forward in this episode. But I think what's more deflating is I think – I would have completely understood splitting with the Jets this year. I think I was also higher on the Jets coming into the season than a lot of people in the Bills content space. But I would have been very understanding of splitting with the Jets. Splitting with the Jets in a game where Aaron Rodgers was out for the entire game, that's the part that really hurts. So if you're looking at it from the larger perspective, being like, I thought we'd split with them and we did, potentially could have split. So we lost one. I thought we'd lose one. It is what it is. Fair point. I think for me, it's just how that loss came. The end result necessarily doesn't justify the means here. Like, there's no excuse for losing that game to a Zach Wilson-led Jets team, a game that you had in hand, that you drove down on a very good defense multiple times. I thought the game plan was good overall from Ken Dorsey, which is another piece we're going to talk about as we move forward. But there was no excuse to lose that game. But that's my only piece there. I like this comment from Carl. Who would have thought that Christian Benford could run down Breece Hall? Is it really that fast? Yeah, I wasn't expecting that. Garrett Wilson thought Breece was gone. There's that piece in the highlight where Wilson throws his hands up around midfield because he thinks it's a house call for Breece. Benford takes a good angle, strides it out, makes a really good play. Aiden saying, last year when the Jets beat us, I felt I could more confidently say that they quite frankly had our number and played a great game. This one actually felt more winnable, and Josh just gave it away. Absolutely. Granted, the Jets forced his hand a little bit, which I'm going to talk about in tonight's episode and break down with Eric tomorrow night in the Cover One film room. But yeah, this was a game that was extremely winnable. Like I just mentioned a minute ago with Jason, like this, if you had told me the Bills lost this game and Aaron Rodgers was quarterbacking it, I would have understood more. I still think the Jets have a good enough defense. I said it leading into this game. The Jets had a defense that almost took them to the playoffs last year with a full season of Zach Wilson, Joe Flacco, and a sprinkle and a dash of Mike White in there, who was probably the best quarterback the Jets had last year. And the Jets defense was so good, they almost made the playoffs with arguably the worst quarterback play and quarterback room in football last year from an EPA perspective and execution standpoint. And they still almost made the playoffs. So even with Zach Wilson, they're not an easy out, but that was a winnable game last night. And to your point, yeah, that one last night was definitely winnable. Josh gave it away. My thought really was, when Rodgers went down and the Bills were up 13-3, my thought really was like, okay, how do we truly evaluate this game? I wasn't even thinking this game could probably be a loss. It was there in the back of my mind a little bit, especially as things started to snowball negatively. But very, 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 very winnable last night. Disappointing. Comment here from Jordan: would rather have a third linebacker than Taylor Rapp out there. Yeah, we saw when the Jets went with heavier personnel, we saw the Bills match that with Taylor Rapp coming on the field for Taron Johnson. Instead of putting a third linebacker out there and going with more of a traditional base package, they went with a third safety. They put Rapp as that third linebacker, another second-level defender. Mixed results. Again, you're going to put him at the second level. You're significantly undersized at all three quote-unquote linebacker spots. Taylor Rapp, Matt Milano, Terrell Bernard. None of those are, big body type of dudes. Milano's a slasher. He shoots gaps. He did that several times last night, but none of these guys are big, physical, well, Milano's physical, but in a different way. None of these guys are gap pluggers, physical run stopping type guys who bring it from a size and frame perspective. They're going to have to win by shooting gaps with speed, by recognizing things and processing accurately and efficiently with their eyes and obviously with the brain. But yeah, they're mixed results for the Taylor Rapp piece. Oh, interesting comment here. I think Josh needs to force the ball even further downfield. Force those two high safeties to play like comically deep. It would put us in an 11-on-9 advantage every play. That's one way to attack too high. You push the ball even further and you attack it. I think the issue is he's doing that at times where it's not advantageous and where the looks aren't there. This isn't pushing the ball between a too high safety look on a post in the middle and you're, overthrowing a little bit or you're making a play. This is him thrown into double coverage, and it's him overlooking routes that are available and open underneath that would generate more positive results and keep this team on schedule and keep them on track. And this is something that trends back towards last season. I've talked about it a bunch on this show. I'll continue to talk about it as we go forward, but I think it's a different piece of it. What else do we got? I like this comment. I'm not quite sure how they're going to pull it off, but I'm still fairly confident the Bills will go undefeated. Yeah, it's a point as we continue to go through. Again, questions, thoughts, comments, concerns, continue to pull them in, but disappointing loss. I think a spot where not a lot of people thought the Bills would be maybe 0-1, but not 0-1 to a Zach Wilson-led Jets team. And with that being said, I think let's dive into some of that stock up, stock down after week one. Again, for you playing at home, joining us live here on this episode, whoever was trending up for you, trending down for you in whatever form or fashion, throw it up into the chat. Questions, thoughts, comments, concerns, all that stuff. I know a lot of you have been doing it already with positive and negative play from different pieces, different aspects of this team schematically. So anything you got, throw it in. Joe's comment here saying, I just finished watching the defensive snaps. Really pleased with all levels, especially the pass rush. Rousseau and Floyd are a match made in heaven. Let's start with the positive pieces. So stock up after week one. And I'm going to start, piggyback on Joe's comment there. The defensive line, I thought, and again, this is everything from a stock up perspective defensively has to be taken with somewhat of a grain of salt, for me at least. Just going up against Zach Wilson, going up against an offensive line that was playing together for the first time in probably forever for them. So just kind of seeing how they matched up, but they looked tremendous, especially Leonard Floyd. And I really want to highlight Leonard Floyd, Greg Rousseau, and Ed Oliver. I put this tweet out earlier. So there was 228 qualifying defensive linemen in week one from a pass rush productivity perspective, that had at least 20% of the pass rush snaps in week one. The Bills had 3 players in the top 16 for pass rush productivity, which is basically, I use it all the time on the show. It's basically a measure of pass rush efficiency. It's a metric that takes your sacks, your hits, your hurries, your pressures relative to how much you rush the passer. So it's better than just a volume metric and statistic, because if you lead the league in pressures but you had 2 times more pass rush snaps than anyone else, kind of skews things a little bit. So again, 228 qualifying defensive linemen in week 1. The Bills had 3 players in the top 16 in terms of pass rush productivity. Leonard Floyd was 3rd with a score of 23.3. Ed Oliver was 4th with a score of 21.9. And Greg Rousseau was tied for 16th with a score of 15.6. For reference, Rashawn Gary of the Packers was 1st with a score of 27.8. I think Leonard Floyd came as advertised. As Roy says here, stock up our D-line pressure. Yeah, I like the comment from Carl here as well, saying Floyd, Kincaid, Diggs, Milano, Benford, all stock up. Yeah, I think if anybody's talking about stock up, for me, it really kind of starts with Leonard Floyd. We have been looking for a consistent pass rush piece off the edge, not just for really for the past several years. And the Bills have done so much to try and remedy that piece. You had the Mario Addison edition. You had Jerry Hughes here for several years in the McDermott era. You've had all these, and I wouldn't even say just from the edge perspective, from a defensive line perspective, we've talked about it a lot, significant resource investment from the draft, from free agency, put into the Bills defensive line. And it seems like no matter what they've done, they've kind of have always had that or those holes in terms of consistent pass rush ability up front. You bring in Von Miller and it's like, okay, now all of a sudden they got this grade A bona fide closer. Let's see who else can step up. Von goes down. There's more questions about the group as the year went on in 2022. But right now, as we stand after week 1, yeah, Leonard Floyd, somebody who I had tabbed as a free agent target in February and March. I didn't know where he would go, but the juice that he adds, so legitimate. And we saw it pay dividends already last night. Unfortunately, it also kind of led to an Aaron Rodgers injury. Not a dirty play, just something that happened, unfortunately, for Rodgers. But you saw the speed, you saw the athleticism, you saw the hand technique, even the way he plays the run. He did miss that tackle on the first Breece Hall run, the 26-yarder in the first quarter, but he plays the run with tenacity. He understands leverage. He understands gap responsibility and run fits. He uses his hands well. He extends, he stacks, he sheds. He's violent at the point of attack against whoever is trying to block him, whether it's a tight end, whether it's an offensive lineman. He's got good burst and pop. And again, that athleticism, a lot of the edges the Bills have had in the Sean McDermott era haven't been overly athletic. They haven't been a juiced up kind of edge grouping. Von Miller was very much the antithesis of what they've looked for at the edge grouping. Athletic, bendy, a moves guy. They've looked for more pocket compressors, more edge compression guys with length, size, not too much bend. Even Rousseau, for as productive as he's been, he's not this overly athletic, bendy, twitched up, change direction kind of guy. Vaughn was a move in that direction. Leonard Floyd was a move in that direction. And again, we saw it pay dividends early. Just his consistent ability to get to the quarterback. 5 pressures last night. Again, this is per PFF. They don't count for half sacks. 5 total pressures for Floyd last night, 2 sacks, 3 hurries. Again, that PRP, pass rush productivity score of 23.3. And he had 10 pass rush snaps. So he had 5 pressures on 10 pass rush snaps. On 16 pass rush snaps. So just, again, a productive debut for Leonard Floyd in a rotation with the rest of this defensive line, and then kicking it inside to Ed Oliver, somebody who you saw several flashes, but then again, looking at the advanced metrics, really showed up big time. 17 pass rush snaps for Ed Oliver, 6 total pressures, 1 sack, 1 hit, 4 hurries. The penetration, the juice and jump and get off. I think he's in an interesting position because he got paid. And now, again, maybe some guys rest on their laurels a little bit, but he almost kind of has to justify the contract that he got with his pay. I think there was a significant portion of Bills Mafia, maybe even in the NFL, but I do think those outside of Buffalo from a fan base perspective and national coverage perspective value Ed Oliver a little higher, just based on what you hear and you see. But I think there was a significant amount of people kind of, rattling up a little bit, wondering why Ed Oliver got that contract and the money and the commitment that the Bills showed him this offseason. But again, in game 1, from a pass rush perspective, you saw that productivity for him. Again, 6 total pressures on 17 pass rush snaps, 1 sack, 1 hit, 4 hurries, a pass rush productivity score of 21.9, and fourth out of 228, I should say, qualifying defensive linemen in week 1. And then that leads us to Mr. Greg Rousseau, tied for 16th, like I mentioned, in pass rush productivity, 17 total pass rush snaps last night against New York. 5 total pressures, no sacks, 1 hit, 4 hurries. So you saw this defensive line really getting after it. We saw juice off the edge. We saw darting inside and shooting gaps. We saw penetration. We saw knockback. We saw it from the defensive line as a whole. Tim Settle had a couple good reps. AJ Epinesa had a couple good reps. Daquan Jones did his thing. I thought it was a good performance from this defensive line as a whole. So stock up overall for those 3 players, but really for the defensive line as a whole, a group that, again, there's been so much investment in the defensive line year over year, year after year, whether in the draft or free agency from this Buffalo Bills team. And Sean McDermott and Brandon Beam believe that the defensive line is the engine for the team. They love the rotations. They love to invest. They want to, in an ideal world, they only have to rush 4 and they can drop numbers into coverage consistently. This defensive line trending well and looked good last night in significant fashion. Dalton Kincaid, I know it was mentioned earlier in the comments, I think he's also trending up from a pass catching perspective. I think there were some blocks that I would have liked him to have executed a little bit better, although he had a really tremendously physical play downfield on Tony Adams, on a Dawson Knox catch in the flat early in the first quarter. So again, I think the blocking aspect for Dalton Kincaid, that's going to be a work in progress. I think that's something where the expectation should be that it's going to be a work in progress, but from a pass catching perspective, and the biggest thing for me with Kincaid coming out of last night, the physicality once he got the ball in his hands, dropping the shoulder, running through defensive backs. You saw yards after catch at Utah, but it was more just the fluidity. You saw some physicality. Like he's not somebody who goes down easily, but he's not somebody that was really kind of like Dawson Knox, where he would drop the shoulder and run through guys or run over guys. But you saw him putting the shoulder down, putting his head down, going through defensive backs and carrying guys for a couple extra yards. You saw the physicality in his game once he got the ball in his hands. And I think that's a really important thing, because based on how the Bills were defended last night when they were in 12 personnel, and they were in 12 personnel more than anyone in week 1, and they had a 12 personnel usage rate in week 1 in a single game more than any team had in a single game last year in all of 2022. Teams are going to defend the Bills' 12 personnel package with their standard nickel grouping. So they're going to leave 5 defensive backs in, which means you are going to get reps where Dalton Kincaid is going to be matched up on a nickel corner or maybe an outside corner or a safety. It's important that he wins that physical matchup. If he's matched up with a defensive back, even a safety, he's going to have the size and frame advantage. He's going to have the weight advantage depending on what weight he's coming in. Now, you got to establish that physicality early and often. If you are Dalton Kincaid, use every advantage in the book. Again, if he's matched up against linebackers, bigger body, bigger frame, thicker type dudes, lean into your athleticism, lean into that fluidity, lean into that technicality and that fluid athleticism, that fluid technicality that he has. If you are matched up against defensive backs, whether you have the ball in space, whether you are in your actual route and in the stem of your route, lean into that physicality, your arm length, your strength, your size, post up guys, or when you get the ball in your hands, run through defensive backs. Nice performance from Dalton Kincaid as a pass catcher once he got the ball in his hands. Could have had a couple more targets that I think were cooked up for him a little bit, but Allen chose to go some other ways. I liked what Dalton Kincaid offered as a pass catcher. James Cook, I think for me, was a stock up as well. I mentioned it earlier. I've been wanting an injection of juice and electricity into this backfield for several years, especially with the light boxes that the Bills see. There were a couple reps where I would have liked him to hit the hole differently or pace things a little differently, which is something that he's still working on. I thought it was something he had to work on coming out of Georgia, but you saw the difference that his speed and his juice makes for this offense. I'm thinking of the one, I don't know if it was a second and short or a third and short, but if you're watching on the broadcast, Bills are going left or right, and he gets the ball and he bounces it outside, and the corner steps up. I believe it's DJ Reed. And Cook kind of jumps back, but he has so much speed that he's able to get the corner and turn the corner. And he turns what could have been a 2 or 3 yard loss into a gain of about 3 or 4, and he gets the first down. That type of speed and electricity is something the Bills have not had in their backfield these past several years. And they haven't had somebody who's that comfortable catching the ball out of the backfield in a variety of ways as well. I think his skill set pairs very well with Josh Allen, with this run scheme, with the Bills offense, more so than Devin Singletary's did and Zach Moss's did. Who else? Frank Gore. Naheem Hines would have been a fun, interesting piece. But I think Cook, what was nice to see that juice and that electricity be effective. He also had, I tweeted it out last night, a tremendous rep in pass protection on Quincy Williams. The Jets bring a cross dog blitz. Cook has to step up. He has Quincy Williams. And if you watch the game last night, if you've ever watched a Jets game, Quincy Williams comes forward. When he comes forward, when he plays the run, when he blitzes, he is the literal definition of a heat-seeking missile, like he is shot out of a cannon, whatever proverbial adage you want to use. He is not somebody that is easy to block, that is easy to take down. He comes forward on that cross dog blitz. Cook gets low, cuts him in his legs, flips him right over to the point that Quincy Williams grabs. It's either he grabs Cook's hair or helmet or shoulder pad as he goes over Cook, pulls him down. Could have been called for defensive holding on the play, which he probably should have been. Which would have been nice because Josh Allen got sacked on this play, but it was a tremendous pass protection rep for James Cook. And that's an aspect of his game that I think is no secret he's had to work on or needs to work on, in order to become a complete running back at this level. As honestly, a lot of college running backs usually need to nowadays, especially nowadays. It's always been something that college running backs have had to work on when they, transition to the program. But again, even more so now, given the nature of the college game. And he's been, more often than not, he's in the right place at the right time. He diagnoses properly. He processes properly. The biggest, I don't want to say deficiency in his game, but the biggest detractor of James Cook's game when it comes to pass protection is just his overall size. He's not the biggest. He's got more of a slender or slight frame for a running back, which is part of the reason why he's so shifty. He's so elusive. He has so much juice and burst and speed. So being at his size and frame, his technique has to be on point. His angles and leverage has to be so on point because he's not somebody that most of these linebackers that are blitzing and coming through, they're the hammer. He's the nail. It's going to be hard just from a size and frame standpoint for him to stand in front of these guys as they're kind of, a battering ram coming full speed ahead at him. And his rep, again, it was just one rep, but that pass protection rep against Quincy Williams, I didn't know if I was ever going to see him, have that quality of a rep against that quality of a blitzing linebacker. Quincy Williams isn't a stud in coverage for the Jets, but when he comes forward like a bat out of hell, like a pure missile. And it was really nice to see James Cook step up and really have that quality pass protection rep against him. Going back to the defensive line, the defensive side of the ball, Shaq Lawson, somebody who I think we all know who Shaq Lawson is at this point, which is really good run defender coming off the edge. He's good on stunts. He's good from a physicality standpoint. He's good at wrong arming, at, again, just setting the edge, being that force player, being that physical presence. He was somebody that the Bills had to lean on a bit from a pass rush standpoint when Von Miller dropped in week 11 last year against the Lions. And I think if you paid attention down the stretch, he was edge 2 opposite of Greg Rousseau from a starting standpoint and a snap share perspective down the stretch. So that shows what the Bills think of Shaq Lawson. And as Steve throws up into the chat right now saying Shaq is very reliable. Yeah, you know what you're going to get. Doesn't have a lot of sexiness to his game. Not the most athletic, not fluid, not bendy, not bursty. He just plays physical. He grinds. He plays angles. He plays leverage. He's tremendous against the run. But he has several reps where he got after the quarterback last night, and that's continued a good string of play and performance from him. So Shaq Lawson last night was actually tied for 4th on the Bills in pressures. He had 3 pressures, no sacks, no hurries. No sacks, no quarterback hits, 3 quarterback hurries, a PRP, pass rush productivity score of 12.5, which is 3 points behind Greg Rousseau. So a productive night for him. And again, his performance is going to be very interesting as we go forward because we know how much the Bills like to rotate their defensive line. If Shaq can continue to produce at this level from a pass rush standpoint, in addition to what he offers against the run, you've got a really fun chess piece matchup group of defensive linemen from the edge all the way to the interior that you can kind of push buttons and pull levers with every single week, depending on the matchup, depending on the opponent. And Shaq Lawson giving you any kind of juice, in the pass rush game was a really nice piece to see. He consistently last night was flashing, getting into the backfield, winning on stunts, winning with angles. He's always been somebody that's very, very effective as a spiker on stunts, especially because, he's just He's physical. Tell him, hey, see the inside shoulder of the right tackle and the inside shoulder or the inside shoulder of the tackle, inside shoulder of the guard. Cool. Hit that spot, mash them both up, and give your defensive tackle some, freedom to move around the edge. He's always been good at that as the spiker, but last night we saw even more juice from him coming off the edge, which was tremendously nice to see. Oh, got to stop. Got a super chat. Super chat from Carl. Thank you very much for being here, Carl. Nice comment earlier, and thank you for the super chat now. Carl says the run game stock was down. They need to keep at it with Cook. 3.8 yards per carry isn't good. 12 carries for 46 yards. Was it the Jets D or Dorsey needs to call better plays? It's always a bit of both. I think when you're talking about anything, I say it on the show all the time. I don't think any one position group, player, coach, schematic piece is ever to blame for anything in football, just because of how many moving parts there are leading up to the game and then on game day. I will say in this game against the Jets, I like the overall plan. And maybe this isn't the answer you want to hear, but it isn't the question here. I think you got to tip your cap to the Jets defense. There were some runs that were available, and Quinnen Williams just blew it up because Quinnen Williams is an all-pro interior defensive lineman and one of the best players in the NFL. Or Jonathan Franklin Myers blew it up, or Huff made a play, or Jermaine Johnson made a play. There were a couple reps where he sniffed out a Josh Allen step up and potential scramble. He sniffed out one of their delayed draws when the Bills were trying to suck in the pass rush and take advantage of it. I think you got to tip the cap to the Jets defense. Obviously, there is some of the whole call better plays. There's always the opportunity to schematically scheme advantages for your players. But I think at a certain point, and I think this is very relative, because especially when you're a super fan of one team, it's easy to just kind of hone in on your team and just think of, well, my guy blew it or my guy won. You really got to look at it from the opponent perspective as well. And the team that you're playing, they're professionals too. They get paid to play this game, and sometimes you got to tip your cap. And so I think the struggles in the run game last night were majority due to the Jets' defensive game plan, but more so the talent that they have, especially on the defensive line. And then also at the second level. Again, Quincy Williams is a very, very, very good run defending linebacker. CJ Mosley, although he's older now at this stage in his career, is still very smart, understands how to play the game. And then you've got that rotation that you have playing in front of them. I thought Al Woods gave them some quality reps inside, wasn't, really letting the Bills get a ton of movement on him. So I think the Bills could have been better from an execution standpoint, but I think from a run game perspective, you got to tip your cap to the Jets defense, because there were runs that were available where the Bills had a hat on a hat and there was potential for something to really develop, and Quincy Williams blew it up, or Quinnen Williams blew it up, or Jonathan Franklin Myers blew it up, and pieces just didn't happen. So again, I think you got to tip your cap to the Jets in that perspective. Like this comment from John, who says, I'm running late, but I immediately smashed that like button. Yes, please and thank you. If you are enjoying this content, please, 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 and thank you. Drop a like on this video. Likes are the lifeblood of these live streams and videos here on YouTube. They significantly affect the algorithm. So if you are enjoying this content, please, 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 and thank you. Drop a like on this video. Let's go through some more here. So some more stock up, stock down. I mentioned the defensive line. A lot of the pieces, one more piece on the defense. Well, two more pieces. One individual, Matt Milano, shooting gaps, gets an interception, kind of gifted to him. Zach Wilson threw it right at him. But I think seeing how Matt Milano played last night, there was no drop-off in his play without having Tremaine Edmonds next to him. I also liked a lot of the communication pieces from Terrell Bernard. I'm not saying that's stock up, but I like that in pairing, in conjunction with Matt Milano's play. But you saw Milano all over the place. Total tackles for loss, shooting gaps, making plays, being strong in coverage. All pro last year, really a significant piece for this defense without having Tremaine Edmonds now. What does the consistency look like at the second level of the Bills defense? And I thought Milano had a strong game last night in coverage. I think he had a strong game from, again, being that game record type of piece. He's always been the guy who shoots gaps, that chaos creator. He either opens up something for someone else or he knifes in and makes a play. I think just his job to just get dropped in there and cause havoc and see what happens. Nice piece. I like what he did last night. Also tying into that from a coverage perspective, again, I thought the Bills coverage played well last night. A lot of stickiness across the board from the back seven, but how much of that is due to Zach Wilson being the quarterback and the operator, if that's your question. Some of that I think is independent of what Wilson was doing. You just saw good coverage from Benford, good coverage on several reps from Tre'Davious White. Even on the touchdown that Garrett Wilson had, which was a phenomenal catch, Trey is in perfect position. Yes, you would like him to knock the ball down and force the incompletion, but he was right there, completely in phase, great positioning. Garrett Wilson just made a play on the ball. I think another one where sometimes you just got to tip your cap. But I thought the Bills' coverage overall, especially early on, even when Rodgers was in the game, there were times when the Jets were looking to go quick game. Rodgers was looking to go quick game. I mean, it contributed to him getting hit by Floyd on the play that tore his Achilles. Rodgers got the ball and was looking to get it out right away, and there was nowhere for him to go. The Bills had good coverage plans, a good coverage scheme, and then they executed well from a coverage standpoint. So some of it, again, take with a grain of salt, given the quarterback play and the offense for the Jets last night. But I thought the coverage aspect of the Bills team had a good overall performance. Like this question from Dave. Dave saying, can you speak on Josh's situational awareness? 3rd and 2, had guys open, but even if you don't make it, you punt at midfield and pin a toothless offense back. Anything but a pick there. I think that's a good segue to the stock down portion of this episode. And for me, it starts with Josh Allen. I think, again, this is another piece where you have to tip your cap to what the Jets did. They forced Josh Allen to read things efficiently and accurately time and time again. They sped up some of his processing. They made him question things. They muddied some of his read. They muddied some of their responsibilities in coverage, kind of made him think, well, is this guy dropping? Is he staying up? Do I hit the flat? Do I push to the corner route? But to this point, I think this is, again, it's a good game plan from the Jets. They've had the Bills' offensive number really the past several meetings, even going back to the end of the 2021 season where they gave the Bills some problems as well. And then we know what happened in 2022. And then obviously what happened last night. This is a well-coached group. This is a skilled group in the back seven. They execute their coverage as well. They have a good combination of skill sets, and they play their coverage as well. They know how to mix them up, and they know what to do, and they know how to really kind of give Josh Allen problems. That being said, I do think, we saw some of that snowballing negativity from Josh Allen last night. He wants to press in certain areas. And you know what was weird too? And again, we're going to break this down in the film room tomorrow night. But as the game went on, he got more, I don't want to say reckless, but he pushed a little more. Early on, we saw him checking the ball down on 3rd and 15 for a gain of 12. We saw him checking the ball down to Deontay Hardy on 1st and 10, all the space underneath, check it down, get it to your playmaker, see what he can do. He took what was being given to him early and often. That 3rd and 2 interception late in the game in the 4th quarter, where he forces it to Gabe Davis on the corner route, and Whitehead jumps in underneath and picks it. Basically a high-low smash concept where you have the corner route and then a flat route underneath. But it was kind of like a bender into the flat instead of just being a traditional like China route or sit route or hook or whatever you want to label it as. They ran that several times in the game. Early on, the first time they ran it, Allen checked it down to Dawson Knox. They ran it with Kincaid and Knox. Actually, it was the rep that I was referencing earlier when Kincaid had a great block on Tony Adams downfield once Knox made the catch. Same scenario multiple times throughout this game where you had that cloud corner, that corner who's kind of sitting in the flats and has to decide, do I sink underneath the corner route or do I come up and play the route in the flat? And the first time on that completion to Knox, he drops back, he looks to his left, he eyeballs Kincaid, and he holds that corner, makes the corner drop a little bit. Then he just opens up, drops it down to Dawson Knox. Knox lowers his shoulder, goes through a man, and gets some good yardage, right? Later in the game, similar concept again. He has Kincaid open in the flat, but he wants to, or maybe it's not Kincaid, he wants to push to Kincaid on the corner route. Wants to push it, doesn't, hits the top of his drop, goes to throw, doesn't. It's the one where Spencer Brown gets driven back into the backfield, and Torrance does a little bit as well, results in a sack. Ball has to get out. He's got the man open in the flat, doesn't take it. And then later we see that interception in the 4th quarter, same concept again in terms of that smash concept, high-low. Sauce Gardner kind of plays it in between where you don't know if he's going to come up and jump the flat or if he's going to drop underneath the corner route. But if Allen just reads it out and hits it at the top of his drop, he has Dalton Kincaid open. It's a 3rd and 2. Kincaid runs it right at the sticks. If you lead it and you throw it to him, it's probably a minimum, a gain of 3, maybe more if he breaks a tackle. But you're getting that first down. Even if he bangs it there a little late, you can still throw it and lead him to the sideline, and he can still get a first down. Josh Allen just, We saw it down the stretch last year. I mentioned it a bunch on the show. Ken Dorsey was getting so much flack last year for he's only calling goal balls and he's only calling vertical routes and he's only calling, send everybody deep and four verts. Ha ha ha. We're only pushing the ball. Ken Dorsey got so much hate last year down the stretch for what he was calling and the play design. And I kept trying to mention it, like there were other guys open on these plays last year where Josh was going vertical and Josh was throwing the ball deep and he didn't need to. He's forcing it downfield. It's either incomplete or there's interceptions. He's turning the ball over and there's other guys that are open underneath. Yes, sometimes coverage dictates that you need to send the ball vertically. And sometimes Josh Wood, some of those reads were correct and some of that was dictated by the defense. But there were times where he's got guys open and he was not taking those guys last year down the stretch. Regular season, and into the playoffs. The one example I'm going to continue to, drill home is the Xavier Howard interception against Miami in the wild card round last year. Allen drops back. He's got Devin Singletary wide open over the middle on a check down because Miami has just backed up and dropped out. It's 17-0 at that point. You are at midfield. Miami has done nothing offensively. First down, and Allen sends it deep. It gets picked by Xavier Howard. He runs it back like 45, 50 yards, puts Miami in good field position. Miami scores. There's no reason to throw that ball there. You had the check down. You had it available. It continues to, that type of play has continued into this year. And the Jets, again, I thought had a really good game plan. They forced Josh Allen to continuously stay efficient, to continuously have to matriculate the ball down the field. They weren't going to give him those chunk plays. And Allen played into that hand. Again, we're going to break this down in the film room last night, but I think it's funny the narrative that we're starting to see after last night with all the turnovers, because this kind of play last year, we saw it in flashes to a significant degree from a sample size perspective in Josh Allen's game, but everybody was either explaining it away with the elbow injury or because Ken Dorsey sucks. And now you're seeing it a little bit last night. Again, to use one play as a microcosm, that 3rd and 2, fourth quarter, he does not need to throw that ball to Gabe Davis. The first interception, I don't love, but it basically equated out to a long punt, right? And backed up the Jets on their offensive possession. But if you slow it down and you go back and you're looking from the all-22, I tweeted this out earlier as well, he's got tons and tons of space underneath to run on that 3rd and 8, and the only person coming at him is Tony Adams, who's closing down because he sees Josh Allen scrambling. I think that's a pretty good matchup. I'll take Josh Allen in space on a 3rd and 8 against Tony Adams closing down in space. Or potentially, again, I don't think he saw it, and I don't know if the throw would have been able to happen. Rolling left, you got to open up and cannon it downfield. He's got Dawson Knox on a corner route on that same side of the field as well. I like this from RJ saying, so now Dorsey and Allen sucks. That's the message. Show over. Dorsey sucks. Allen sucks. It's over. But I think, again, this goes into a point, and I hate saying that. I've said this before because I'm not saying it to pat myself on the back or anything like that. This is who Josh Allen is, for better or for worse. This yin and yang, risk-reward, Brett Favre-esque on the field. Guy who can make your jaw drop on one play and to make you want to rip every strand of hair out of your head in frustration on the next play. This is who Josh Allen is. The same guy who hurdles a linebacker that makes everybody stand up and applaud him and stand in ovation. That guy is the same guy who's pushing the ball downfield when he does not need to. It's the same guy who's thrown into double coverage when he does not need to. It's the same guy who throws up a YOLO ball saying, screw it, let's see what happens. It's the same guy. And when it works out, it's phenomenal and everybody applauds him. And when it doesn't, it's boneheaded and stupid and it could potentially kill your team. What's worked out for Allen thus far in his career is that even though he plays in that risk-reward type of fashion, usually there's more reward than risk. He may make a couple boneheaded plays, but for every one, I don't know, there's like 3 to 5 ones that you're just like, oh my God, that's amazing. Like, look at what this guy can do. Last night, it was the opposite. There was more risk and more negativity than there was reward. And we continue to see this kind of play. And my biggest concern for Ken Dorsey in conjunction and working with Josh Allen, and again, I mentioned this going into the offseason, there were issues I had with Ken Dorsey schematically as the season progressed last year. Some of his concepts and some of what he was doing with Allen, I felt like he was relying on Allen too much to be a unicorn and not giving him enough easy buttons and enough layups to kind of just get him in rhythm early on, but just make life easier for him as the games progressed. That was a definite concern for me. But I thought, again, first-year coordinator and play caller. We'll see what happens going forward. Now, a concern that I have, and several people have mentioned it in my comments as I've been tweeting these past couple of days. My thought now is, or one of my bigger concerns is, can Ken Dorsey rein in Josh Allen from kind of playing this YOLO hero ball? I don't know what you want to label it. If you want to label it sugar high, YOLO ball, hero ball, whatever. Can he rein him in from doing this? Because again, this is another game, another moment where there's different options underneath, and he can make different plays. And he's just not in that moment. And to course correct someone's decision making, course correct someone's processing, it's a very hard thing to do. And I also want to mention, before anybody jumps on and says, see, this is why Brian Daboll should have never left. Josh Allen was tied for the third most turnovers in the NFL. Brian Daboll's last year as offensive coordinator with the Buffalo Bills. So this isn't something that has just started to rear its head under Ken Dorsey. Josh Allen has been this turnover based kind of guy the past several years, going back to Brian Daboll's last year as offensive coordinator with the Buffalo Bills. Again, this is who he is. It's the risk and reward. I'm going to mention one more example one more time that kind of puts it in perspective. Think of the touchdown to James Cook at the end of the first half in the Saturday night game against the Miami Dolphins. Allen scrambles. He bleeds the whole clock and ends up throwing it across his body into the back of the end zone. Cook comes down, makes the catch, touchdown. Oh my God, what an amazing play. Josh Allen creating off script, amazing. That was a horribly inefficient play. The odds of success on that play were not good. And you wasted so much time, i.e. all the time, that if there's an incompletion there, you don't even get a field goal out of it. But it gets glossed over because it was a touchdown. All you're going to remember is the touchdown. What an amazing play. This is who Josh Allen is. It's unfortunate when it works against you at times. And when it works, it's beautiful. I got to stop because we got another super chat. Jonathan, thank you very much for being here. Thank you very much for the super chat. Jonathan says the Bills will win the next 3. Raiders at home, Washington on the road. They'll do well versus the NFC. Then Miami at home is a tough game. Then they got Jacksonville in the UK. I can't stand that game. That's me saying that, not Jonathan. And Jonathan says Jacksonville are a much better team this year, but should be okay if they stop the turnovers. So I think that's a fair point from Jonathan. This goes to Thomas's comment earlier. Put things into perspective, right? Regardless of what happened in week 1, if the Bills stomped the Jets or if the Bills had a deflating loss like they did, the season is not over or the season is not made regardless of what happens in week 1. If the Bills boat raced them 70-0, I don't think you should sit here saying the Bills are going undefeated and the Bills are going to be amazing. You take everything a game at a time. You get right against the Raiders, which we're going to dive into in a minute. You take care of Washington on the road, and then you start to pick yourself back up as the schedule gets tougher with Miami, with Jacksonville, with the Chargers, with Kansas City. Not in order, just naming these tough teams. But I think that's a good piece there, Jonathan. I like where your head is at. But yeah, so how Josh Allen played last night, I think, one, you do have to take into account what the Jets did to force that hand. And not every team's going to be able to do that. Not every team is going to have the defensive line that the Jets had to rush 4 and consistently drop 7 and have a numbers advantage in coverage and be able to be coverage diverse in a multitude of ways and play man and play match coverage and have the quality that they have on the back end, right? Not all teams are going to have that. 1. 2, not all teams are going to be able to put together a game plan like that to force his hand and kind of make him question things and make him read everything out and make him slow play from his processing and his read standpoint. Not everyone's going to be able to do that. But the Jets do have a good blueprint on him. They execute it well. And I think some of it is tied into, unfortunately, just how Josh Allen plays. This is who he is at this point. The yin and the yang, the risk and reward, the guy who wants to push the ball downfield. And I think what's more concerning with it is usually these type of mistakes and these type of turnover worthy or turnover prone plays usually happen in conjunction with one another, and you get that snowballing effect. And I think a lot of it is due to Josh tries to make up for it either directly by being like, oh, I threw an interception, I have to make up for that. Let me try and get a touchdown immediately, as soon as I possibly can. Or it's just because he continues to not learn from like previous and past mistakes. And it was nice to see him own up to it in the press conference after the game last night, but we've heard that story from him before saying, I got to be better. This loss is on me, yada, yada. You need some kind of, foot to the ground a little bit, actual substance, actual action going forward. So it's disappointing. Had a bad game last night. Even the throw to Cook that got broken up by Quincy Williams, if he just puts a little touch and a little arc on that ball, that's a touchdown, easy to Cook. Cook was not way by, but he had a good step and a good angle on Quincy Williams Just lean that in, float that in a little bit. That's an easy touchdown. So Josh had an off game. Looks like he forced things a little bit. But again, this is not par for the course for him as a whole. But I think this is, you're going to have to live with these kind of games with Josh Allen. This is who he is, the risk reward, risk taker kind of guy. And when it works, he's jumping over linebackers and it's amazing and it's beautiful. And when it doesn't work, he's thrown into double coverage and he's making bad decisions and he's getting picked off. But the guy who makes those poor decisions and forces the ball into coverage is the same guy. It's the same engine. It's the same wheel in the brain that makes him try to leap over a linebacker and make a play. That's just who he is, and it's unfortunate. I think a big thing for Ken Dorsey is trying to get him to be reined in like a wild horse and kind of trying to see what he can do in that regard. Because the schematic pieces, the play calling perspective, and the design last night wasn't a huge problem. It was not bad. And Josh Allen was sticking to the script early on. And I know you might say, well, they only had 13 points before that last drive in the end, so it wasn't going good. Turnovers doomed that to a degree, but also, again, the Jets have a really good defense, and you got to play within the system and the scheme and the design. The Jets were not going to give up anything deep. They were trying to keep everything in front of them. They were trying to confuse and muddy Josh's reads and progressions and processing, and they did that. Just stay the course like he did early on. The check down to Damian Harris, the check down to Deontay Hardy, the slant to Stephon Diggs, hitting the flat route on the smash concept to Dawson Knox. Just kind of stay that course. The issue is Josh kind of gets in his own way. It's almost like he says, I've had enough of this inefficient ball. I need a chunk play. And then he goes for that chunk play and he's chucking things up when he doesn't need to. That decision-making, that situational awareness is unfortunate. I think you also combine that with, I don't want to say skittish in the pocket, because I think the word skittish implies that you're like fearful or you're worried or you're scared. But I think frantic might be a good way to put it. You see that kind of frantic play in the pocket from Josh Allen once pressure starts to happen in games and he starts to evade from the pocket earlier than he needs to. He'll have a clean pocket and he sees a flash of color and all of a sudden he's trying to step up and run through a gap, or he's trying to escape out the front door or back door. And one, he either doesn't need to, and or two, he kind of runs himself into pressure a little bit. That was a piece that I tweeted out earlier today, and as I go through my notes now and try and grab that piece, being responsible for the pressures that happen. So of the 35 QBs total in week one, Josh Allen was first in own pressures allowed with 5, and he was 6th in the percentage of dropbacks with some responsibility for pressure at 26.3%. That's per PFF, and that's amongst all QBs. That played. So I didn't take anybody out with sample size or anything like that. I think also another piece to mention, the Jets didn't blitz Josh Allen on 78% of his dropbacks. So 78% of the time, there was less than 5 rushers coming. Allen's numbers on those plays, he had a QB rating of 48.4, which is very bad. He had 3 interceptions, the 1 touchdown. He averaged 2.97 seconds to throw, which is a very long time. Pushing 3 seconds is a lot. He had 5.1 yards per attempt and a 63.6 completion percentage. So again, the Jets were able to get pressure with 4. They were able to generate that piece, but Allen was kind of his worst enemy at times, getting skittish in the pocket, running himself out when he didn't need to, and making poor decisions. And those games are going to happen. That's my big takeaway from all this. I said it last year after several of the plays in the Miami game in the playoffs. This is just who Josh Allen is. It's the yin and the yang. And as Joe says it here, I knew Allen was in a mental battle when I saw him try barrel rolling over 2 linebackers. Yeah, there's times where his never say die attitude are awesome. When, it's 3rd and 7 and you're running and you're going to get tackled at 6, you need to get that extra yard to get the first down. Awesome. Lower your shoulder and try and get through somebody. Versus you've already got the first down and you're still running upright. Why are you trying to run through 2 linebackers? What are you doing? Or just slide once in a while. And I think there's even on the one play, I don't know, I'm pretty sure McDermott was talking to Allen, but Allen kind of keeps himself upright and gets decked by the sideline when he did not need to. He kind of almost comes back in and puts a shoulder down. And they cut to McDermott really quick and he's pointing to his head and he's going, be smart. I believe that was to Allen. Like, there's times where he just takes risks when he doesn't need to. But again, that's just who he is. Sometimes he takes risks when he doesn't need to, and it's ugly and it's brutal. And sometimes he takes risks when he doesn't need to, and it's jaw-dropping and amazing and awesome. He's Professor Chaos. That's who he is. It's coined by Nate Tice. That's who Josh Allen is. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Just like, Brett Favre. He has that interception that ended his time in Minnesota. Bonehead, stupid interception against the Saints in the NFC Championship that sent the Saints to the Super Bowl for all intents and purposes. And then he's got the multitude of other throws throughout the entirety of his career where he's just zipping things in between 3-4 defenders, throwing balls into windows that are not possible for the majority of humans on Earth. That's just who he is, yin and yang. And it was disappointing last night, to say the least. Aiden with a nice stat here saying Josh nearly had an 80% completion rate in the first half when he was following the game plan. I don't put all the eggs into the completion rate basket because you could be 10 for 10 and only have like 50 yards because you're checking it down and not really moving the ball or matriculating anything anywhere. But yeah, Bills had 13 points in the first half. Could have had more if not for the turnovers. He was making good decisions. And it was on, again, we're going to talk about it in the film room last night, but if you follow me on Twitter at @pro__ant, I put together a lot of threads and tweets and breakdowns of the all 22 camera angle of the Bills offense last night. There's times where it's just the same concepts that they're running throughout the course of the game last night. And early on, he's taken what's given to him. And then later, when they're still up and he should still be taking what's given him, he's just trying to force it. That's just the nature of the beast. And unfortunately, came back to bite the Bills, and they lost last night. One last piece, not going to dive into it too much. Special teams coverage. I know the leg whip should have happened or should have been called, and the Jets shouldn't have scored on that punt return, but the coverage was poor. The punt was to the wrong direction. Jay Feely did a good breakdown, former NFL kicker and now analyst for CBS, on how the punt did not work in conjunction with the coverage, and then the poor coverage on top of that. Special teams coverage has been concerning. Tyler Bass is phenomenal, so I don't want to say special teams are a stock down, but special teams coverage has been concerning and it's worrisome, and that's an aspect that you cannot afford to be bad in. And special teams have usually been pretty consistent under Sean McDermott. He believes in strength in all three phases, so to see continued struggles from a coverage standpoint in special teams like we did to a degree in the preseason is concerning. And so stock down from a coverage standpoint for the Buffalo Bills. And that's the last stock down piece as I take a drink of water here. Wasn't expecting to do an hour on the Bills Jets, but nonetheless, here we are. Now, let's turn the page. Let's get a fresh script. Let's move forward and let's dive into the Raiders versus Bills matchup here going into week 2 and look at the schematic components that will decide Bills versus Raiders in week 2. I want to start with Maxx Crosby, who I said in a conversation with somebody today, it depends on how you define the word underrated, but if your definition is based on how good a player is versus how much they're talked about nationally, Maxx Crosby has a tremendous case for being the most underrated player in the NFL. Just absolute monster coming off of both edges, right side, left side, versus the pass, versus the run. He's so good. His effort is relentless. He plays a ton of snaps, does not wear down, loves to go inside, loves to set you up outside and then dart inside or swipe the hands and go inside. The first schematic component that'll decide Bills versus Raiders. Can the Bills handle Maxx Crosby? He spent a lot of time against Denver in week 1. Lined up opposite right tackle Mike McGlinchey. That's because on the other side, you got left tackle Garrett Bowles, who's a really good left tackle for the Denver Broncos. Crosby went over there from time to time, but he does not have a side that he lives on. He is side versatile. You could put him on the left. You could put him on the right. He'll go wherever the matchup is most advantageous. And if you're the Buffalo Bills, I think it's no surprise on the offensive line. If you're talking about the tackles, the most advantageous matchup, if you are a good edge rusher, is on the right side against Spencer Brown. So that first schematic component, Maxx Crosby against Spencer Brown. There are reps, again, I put them on my Twitter earlier today, where Maxx Crosby just abused the hell out of Mike McGlinchey. He had one, led to a sack, comes off of a wide alignment, gets into, actually, I believe I can show some of these here, gets into the chest of Mike McGlinchey, drives him back, and then just the ability to then swim down after that is absolutely tremendous. Let me go here and show my screen here. Let's see here. Boom. Let's put up the Twitter page there. Let's see if we go full screen. Do we still see that? Yes, there we go. So this rush here from Maxx Crosby, he's on the right side. See me highlight him there. Wide alignment. Mike McGlinchey, right tackle, 69 there. Hashtag nice. Watch Crosby come off the edge and get underneath him, knock him back, and then McGlinchey's going to try and reset himself right here. So as McGlinchey goes to do that, Crosby then quickly swims over him, which drops McGlinchey, and then he gets the sack on Russell Wilson. Guy is an absolute monster off the edge, a maniac off the edge. And I mean that with as much positivity as possible. Just that is again, the power and the get off and the technique, right? Look how far Mike McGlinchey is not a small man at right tackle. Look how much he gets underneath him, drives him back, and then the reaction and the quickness to understand, okay, he's on his heels. Cool. He's going to reset. Let me hit him with that swim move. And he hits it so quickly, and McGlinchey's trying to lean forward. He just slips and falls and drops down. Just, oof. That's a quality rep. Maxx Crosby is one of the elite players in the NFL, not just at the edge position or defensive line, in the entire NFL. That rep right there is absolutely tremendous from Maxx Crosby. Again, dude, absolute monster to drop that down there. I'm going to pull up another clip for you folks here. Again, some more Maxx Crosby stuff because I really enjoy his game. And I think also, too, what is a nice piece of Crosby's game is the relentlessness at which he plays. You get someone who gives maximum effort, no pun intended. And I love this comment from Steve saying Crosby has super violent hands. He absolutely does. You get somebody who gives maximum effort on every single play. And that's part of what I tweeted. And I like that joke. And I spelled maximum with 2 X's because I thought that was funny. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's just me. Watch the rep here from Crosby. Again, lined up off that right edge in a wide alignment. Lining up in that wide alignment gives you the opportunity to kind of put the offensive lineman, in this case, the right tackle, put them on an island. It gives you a better angle, allows you to generate more speed, which can convert, speed to power. But here's a nice piece. He beats him inside. And this is a move you'll see a lot. The ability for Crosby to get... He gets completely into the chest of McGlinchey. He's under him right there. Gets into the chest, then chucks him. Look at the torque. McGlinchey is now completely turned over his right shoulder. He's almost horizontal instead of being in a proper posture position to be able to withstand this and be able to anchor. He's got no chance here. His feet are crossed. He's crossed over with his upper body. Crosby has him in a completely disadvantageous spot. He's torqued him. He's turned him. It's over. Crosby gets through, but he trips. Maybe even a purposeful trip as McGlinchey sticks out his foot there. But Crosby trips, slips and falls. Watch as he slips and falls. He still reaches, grabs. He gets Wilson's leg and McGlinchey's leg, and he takes them both down as the play goes on. Focus on the left side of the screen as we move forward here, and he takes them both down. And this is how he plays on every single rep. Dude is a whirling dervish of violence, of speed, of tenacity. He's such a fun player to watch. I suggest if you're ever watching a Raiders game, if it's on, or if you have YouTube TV or whatever Sunday Ticket is on right now, and you're watching the Raiders game, just hone in on Maxx Crosby. He does this regularly. He wins in a variety of ways, and they're all physical. They're violent, but he's physical and violent, but he's also got good technique on top of it. And I think that's what is such an intriguing aspect of his game and makes him such a problem to deal with, because he can beat you with speed. He can beat you with power. He can beat you with violence. He can beat you with technique. He's got a tremendous swipe. He's got tremendous hand technique. Like, that's a scary piece right there. And I don't think Mike McGlinchey is an amazing right tackle. I think he got overpaid this offseason by Denver, but Crosby makes him look like absolute garbage on that play. With just a real quality pass rush rep on that rep there. And then I got one more coming from Mr. Maxx Crosby, which I'm sorry to make anyone queasy. I know it's probably making some people queasy. So here, this one's nuts. This one's against the run. So sometimes you want to see that and be like, okay, guy's good against the pass. Guy rushes the quarterback tremendously. But does he play the run? So let's show you Maxx Crosby playing the run. Here he is again, lined up on that right side, but from our vantage point, he's lined up on the left here again in a wide alignment. This one's funny because he comes off the ball, gets through McGlinchey, Got the arms extended there. Well, he's got the hand placement there. He's about to get extended. Sheds McGlinchey. Tight end runs into him. The tight end coming across runs into him. As I wind it back here. Takes him on, works through him, keeps working down the line, makes the tackle on Javonte Williams. Just, again, relentlessness, high motor, tremendously conditioned athlete, problem in all three phases. Quinnen Williams was an all-pro caliber dude on the interior for the Jets in week 1. Crosby is every bit of that coming off the edge. Absolute terror, absolute monster. This is a good example of, Steve in the comments earlier saying Crosby has super violent hands. Watch the hands, the placement, the activity, the power, bang, shed, bang, bangs right into that tight end coming across, and then again, runs down the running back and makes the tackle. Not an easy play. He works through 2 blockers, reads everything instantaneously, processes it, and then takes down Javonte Williams. Real nice piece. Real nice piece from Maxx Crosby. And now I want to show one more just because I like Maxx Crosby and I like who he is as a player. One more in case you weren't sold, in case you're like, yeah, but is he really that good? Do we really need to see? Are we sure here? One more from Mr. Maxx Crosby. Again, lined up on that right side. 2 tight ends for the Denver Broncos to that side. Watch him shoot the gap, draws the hold, still makes the tackle. Again, relentless. Burst, get off, leverage, lean, tenaciousness, ferocity, darts inside. He gets held. He gets held and dragged down to the ground. Doesn't let it affect him. Plays right through it, falls down to the ground, pops back up, makes the tackle. Relentless. Relentless. That's going to be a problem for the Buffalo Bills. He had a very strong performance in week 1 against Denver. Again, I showed you several of the plays there. He had more. I honestly could have done like a 45-minute episode just on how good Maxx Crosby is, but that's going to be the number one schematic piece. Can they handle Maxx Crosby? They're going to line him up on that right side. He's effective off that right side. Like I showed you again, you can kick him over to the left. I think he could present problems for Deion Dawkins significantly as well, but Dawkins is a better tackle than Spencer Brown is. The Raiders are going to put Maxx Crosby on Spencer Brown, and we're going to see how Spencer Brown holds up. And then we're going to see how, sorry, RJ. RJ says, I thought the game preview would be more positive. I hate the fact that we have to have Spencer Brown on our team. It's going to get more positive. I'm going to go into more pieces, but it starts there. So then now the comment is, okay, how do you correct for that, right? Do you put Dawson Knox on the line? Do you go with that spread gun look where you've got chip help? Do you have Cook help out of the backfield? Do you have more Harris and Murray who are there trying to help as well? Do you have those looks where Spencer Brown knows he has help on the inside with Osiris Torrance? The good news with it overall, from the Crosby conversation is, aside from Crosby, I don't think they have really a true threat aside from Crosby on their defensive line. They took Tyree Wilson from Texas Tech early in the draft. He didn't have a really strong week in week 1. Again, this is a guy who is unrefined, but he's big, he's huge, he's powerful. He can bull rush you. He can have some speed to power and knock you into the backfield, but you didn't really see a ton of activity from anyone else on the defensive line for the Raiders. They had 10 pressures in week 1 against Denver. 6 of them came from Maxx Crosby. So he is the guy to pinpoint. He is the guy to watch. That is one positive. So if you course correct for Maxx Crosby, it's not like, even to the Jets, right? If you're trying to course correct for Quinnen Williams, it's like, yeah, but they also have JFM. They also have Bryce Huff. They also have Jermaine Johnson. Carl Lawson didn't play, but it's like, oh, they also have Carl Lawson. You had more guys and pieces to account for. With the Raiders, no disrespect to anybody else on the defensive line, you're really just having to account for Maxx Crosby, which is easier schematically. So that's the first point and the first piece. Also, continue on that defensive side of the ball. They are light at the linebacker position. They're 2 starting linebackers. Robert Spillane, formerly of the Pittsburgh Steelers, now on the Las Vegas Raiders. He's 6'1", 229 pounds. Then you have Divine Diablo, former safety from Virginia Tech, now linebacker with the Raiders. He's 6'3", 223 pounds. They're athletic. They're smaller. They play hard. They play fast. You can take advantage of them in the play action game. Suck them up into coverage, throw it behind them, and or run downhill against them. They want to shoot gaps. They're going to bang. Diablo doesn't play like he's only 223 pounds. He will take on pulling guards and pulling offensive linemen. He will get under them, and he will stick them in the backfield and or at the line of scrimmage. But you will have the size advantage against them if you are running, especially in the box. So how do you combat that? How do you attack that? And, expose that potential aspect of their defense, more downhill runs, inside zone, more duo, pin and pulls. Get your bigger athletic offensive linemen onto the smaller, lighter linebackers. And again, lighter and smaller from a frame and weight perspective overall of the Raiders. I think this is an advantage run week if you are the Buffalo Bills. You're going to get penetration from the front. They're going to stunt their defensive line. Again, guys like Crosby are going to want to dart inside. They're going to, you get more aggressive. They got more aggressive as the game went on against Denver. So you will see some aggressive nature from their defense as a whole. You'll see blitzes. You will see slot blitzes. You'll see run stunts. You'll see run blitzes. You'll see that aspect again. They're a penetrating, aggressive front. They want to get through gaps and cause havoc and chaos, but they're not the most skilled defensive line, and they are more of a smaller, lighter group at the linebacker spot. I think the Bills have the advantage from a skill perspective in the trenches offensively versus the Raiders defense, and from a size perspective. You should be able to grind them down, wear them down, get after them, and go forward. I also mentioned that play action piece, right? So Russell Wilson, he was only pressured on 21.6% of his snaps against the Raiders. But Denver used a lot of quick game, first and foremost, kind of like what the Bills did early against the Jets, thing Allen got away from. So again, Wilson was only pressured on 21.6% of his snaps against Denver, which is low, but they used a lot of quick game and they used play action. Russell Wilson's time to throw in week 1 was 2.74 seconds, which isn't very long. And that's with him having several reps where he was scrambling and doing Russell Wilson things. Russell Wilson in Denver used play action on 32.4% of their pass snaps in week 1 against the Raiders. For reference, the Bills used play action on only 14% of their snaps versus the Jets. When the Bills did go play action against the Jets, they were on the whole successful. Allen was 5 of 5 on 7 dropbacks, although he was pressured twice and sacked twice. He had a rating of 109.2, which is very good. Russell Wilson versus the Raiders on play action in week 1, 7 of 11 on 12 dropbacks, 2 pressures, no sacks, 115.5 rating. Get some play action against the Raiders, especially if you can get under center play action. The Raiders' number 1 coverage that they used in week 1 was cover 3. You can attack the seams. You can use those sail concepts. You can get them in some high lows and pound the flats, right? And attack those vulnerable spots in cover 3. But those linebackers, they will get sucked up. That safety that's spinning down, usually it's going to be Trevon Merrick of the Texas Christian University, TCU, former Horned Frog, now a Las Vegas Raider. He's usually that safety that's spinning down in those cover 3 looks. If he does that, cool, he'll suck up in that run game. Diablo will get sucked up in that run action. So will Robert Spillane. And when that happens, especially when it's under center play action, right? Account for Maxx Crosby, which is easier said than done. Play action, suck those linebackers up, hit those overs, hit those in breakers, hit those pieces. The Bills have an opportunity to generate chunk plays against this Raiders defense because of the roster build out for the Raiders defense combined with schematically how they play from a cover 3 perspective. So there will be opportunities there. Now, another piece that I want to mention, again, the Raiders won in week 1, but they, and some of this is part Russell Wilson as well, but as I pull up some charts here, I'm going to pull up Russell Wilson's passing charts from week 1. And again, some of this is dictated by what the Raiders did defensively to force this, but let's share the screen here. Let's show. Boom, there we go. That's Russell Wilson's passing chart from week 1 against the Raiders. 27 to 34, 177 yards, 2 touchdowns. 19 of Wilson's 34 attempts were between 0 to 9 yards. And there's his passing chart there. You can see, again, not a ton in the middle of the field. Look where a lot of his completions and his targets were. Around that 10-yard mark, underneath, in the flats, outside the hashes. That's where there's going to be vulnerabilities in that cover 3 spot. You can kind of force that flat defender and that deep third defender. Who's got who? You can play off those high lows. You can create some leverage with motion, either fast motion or surge motion right at the snap, or kind of rearranging some things. You can use stacks and bunches and trips and create leverage and get out in front of their guys early. They're not the best with match coverage, and they will try that from time to time. So if you look where Russell Wilson attacked them, I think it's a good place to start. But then when you have the skill set at receiver that the Bills do, at tight end the Bills do, the potential mismatches that you have there combined with Allen's arm, I think you should see more attacking in the middle of the field. So the flats and the underneath is going to be available. I think you got to start with that early. You have to suck up that Raiders defense. You have to force them to honor the underneath, to honor the flat routes. And then as the game progresses, then you can start to attack, 10 to 15, 10 to 20, maybe 20 plus. You can attack the seams. You can attack over the middle. I think the opportunity for Allen, given his arm strength and his size, again, Russ isn't the biggest dude, so he's not the guy who's attacking that over the middle area. If you see that availability for Allen, get some under center play action, you suck in Diablo and Spillane, those linebackers, and then you hit those over routes or those in breakers or those seams at 10, 12, 13, 14 yards. You put that single high post safety into conflict, look him off. If you're Josh Allen, hit him the other way. Allen has the size and the arm to work that area of the field that Russell Wilson does not. Oh, also really good stat poll from Kendall Mursky. Hey, Kendall. Kendall says the Raiders pressured the QB on 18.2% of play action dropbacks in week 1. That was the 6th lowest rate in the NFL in that week 1 area. So nice stat poll there, Kendall. So again, you want to put things together. You look at the vulnerability of the Raiders defense, the cover 3, how they react to run action, and then how little they pressure the QB on play action dropbacks in week 1. That's a recipe for success. And again, Josh Allen is a very good play action quarterback, as most quarterbacks are. Most quarterbacks are usually more successful with play action than they are just regular straight up dropbacks. Attack with play action, attack with the run. It should be a very simple philosophy. Raiders also like to use their nickel coverages. Marcus Peters, Hobbs is their nickel corner, and Bennett is their other corner. They're going to be a nickel. Hobbs is a really tiny guy. He's fast. He's bursty. It's going to be a matchup problem if he's got to cover Dalton Kincaid or he's got to cover Dawson Knox. He's feisty and tenacity. He's going to look to penetrate and shoot gaps against the run. So he's not somebody that he's not soft, but he is smaller. You can take advantage of that matchup piece. So run it right at him, run it down their throats, take advantage of the size and the power that you have up front, and maybe even the talent advantage that you have in the box against the Raiders, then work in that play action, specifically that under center play action. But I think you could also tie in some RPO looks. Again, Diablo and Spillane are very reactive. They will come forward, take advantage of them over the middle of the field, work the flats as well, make them have to honor those pieces and come up and take shots and chunk plays as the game goes on. This is another game against the Raiders defense where you have to stay patient early and then start to reap what you sow and reap the benefits later on in the game. Another piece I want to mention against the Raiders. So the Raiders, no blitzes for the Raiders on 78.4% of their snaps versus Denver. Like I mentioned earlier, that's similar to what the Jets did to the Bills in week 1. The Jets didn't blitz Allen on 78% of dropbacks. Again, on those dropbacks for Allen, a rating of 48.4, 3 interceptions, 1 touchdown, 2.97 seconds average time to throw, 5.1 yards per attempt, and a 63.6 completion percentage. So not blitzing hurt Allen and the Bills last night against the Jets. But again, also it's tied to the Jets having a tremendous front four and their ability to get after you with just using their front four. The Raiders do not have a similar front to the Jets in any way, shape, or form. We showed those Maxx Crosby highlights earlier in this episode. Crosby is an absolute monster. He is absolutely tremendous. He is someone to be feared. He is someone to be respected in every way, shape, and form, but they don't have the depth on the rest of that defensive line like the Jets do. So course correct for Crosby, take advantage of the linebackers and the size, and you could have a recipe for success if you are the Buffalo Bills offense. Now let's kick it to the other side. Raiders offense against the Bills defense. So watching their week 1 tape against the Broncos and some of the advanced metrics from a personnel perspective don't get updated until later in the week. So I don't have the official numbers on it now. So this is just like tape study in my own charting. You are going to see a lot more traditional looks from the Raiders offense. Josh McDaniels, Bill Belichick disciple, Jimmy Garoppolo, efficient rhythm, timing-based quarterback, fits well in that McDaniel scheme, was drafted into that scheme in New England. You are going to see 21 personnel with a traditional fullback. Jakob Johnson is their fullback. He is an absolute hammer. You're going to see more traditional offense when you're watching the Raiders play. in this game. Okay. And when I say traditional offense, I mean like your basic, not I don't say basic, but 90s kind of offense. I formation, X receiver over here, tight end next to the right tackle, Z receiver next to him, flanker over there, regular I formation behind with a fullback and a tailback. The tailback being Josh Jacobs. Strong I formation, twins to the left in a strong I formation, or twins with an I formation. All these pieces, you're going to see more of a traditional offensive look with a traditional hammer of a fullback if you are the Buffalo Bills. Also paired within that, the Raiders will also use sets where they will have a sixth offensive lineman, adding to that heavy personnel pro package look. They're only going to go spread when they have to, 3-by-1, 11 personnel or 10 personnel. Factoring into that a little bit, Jacoby Myers, former New England Patriot, had a phenomenal week in week 1. Took a very dangerous shot to the head as the game was winding down. He is currently in concussion protocol. It looked brutal. They brought the card out for him. He was able to walk out under his own power. But Jacoby Myers was a very effective piece pairing with Davante Adams in week 1. That's something to keep an eye on as well. If Myers is out, I would expect the Raiders to lean more into their heavier pro personnel type of looks. Again, they are only going spread or 3-by-1, things like that when they have to. Jacoby Myers in concussion protocol, he led the team in targets, yards, receptions, and touchdowns in week 1 versus Denver. 10 targets, 81 yards, 9 catches, 2 touchdowns. Davante Adams had Patrick Surtain the second on him for the majority of the game. PS2 looked really good against Adams. Adams got him from time to time. And then knowing McDaniels and knowing what Jimmy G likes, you are going to see in breaking routes from Jimmy G, you are going to see, digs, you're going to see slants, you are going to see benders on the inside there. You are going to see those aspects of, you're going to see them attack the areas of the field that Jimmy G is comfortable with. And you're not going to see a lot of verticality downfield. You're not going to see them push the ball a ton downfield. Although Jimmy G did do a pretty decent job with his distribution in week 1. I'm going to share my screen right now. There's Jimmy G's passing chart from week 1 against the I would say Las Vegas against the Denver Broncos. And so you see there, again, not a ton of passing attempts, 26 passing attempts. Again, this team wants to run the ball. They want to run it at you downhill style with Josh Jacobs. They'll work in some mid zone. They'll work in some gap scheme. But this is a team that wants to run it at you with Josh Jacobs between the tackles and get downhill. And then you pair it with the passing style of Jimmy G there. So not a ton to the left. And overall, when you're breaking down, he had a pretty solid distribution of throws, 11.5%. Of his throws were 20 plus, 26.9 were from 10 to 19 yards, 46.2% were 0 to 9, and 15.4 were behind the line of scrimmage. Again, smaller-ish sample size because he only had 26 attempts. His one interception was in the red zone, tried to force a ball in the low red zone from about the 5-yard line, got tipped up in the air, got picked off. But if you look there, again, Jimmy's going to attack in the middle of the field. He's comfortable throwing in between the hashes or around the hashes. He's also more comfortable going to his right than his left, but some of that is going to be dictated by matchup in terms of where he was going. But Jimmy G, knowing who he is, again, that Patriot offense under Josh McDaniels plays to Jimmy G's strength. Going to have route spacing, and then Jimmy G wants to play with timing, with rhythm, stay on schedule. He's not looking to create off script. He's not looking to generate explosive plays via air yards downfield. He's looking to hit in-breaking routes with precision and timing, looking to get the ball into his playmakers' hands who win with technique. Again, I don't think maybe Jacoby Myers plays. The head injury was super scary. He was in the fencing position. It looked bad. Again, they brought the card out for him. I don't know if Myers is going to play. I think Myers is fantastic. I would have loved the Bills to have brought him in, but he was priced out with how much he got this year. The Patriots gave Juju Smith-Schuster the same amount of money that the Raiders gave Myers, which I found ridiculous because I would take Myers 1,000 times out of 1,000 chances. But nonetheless, he is with Vegas. If Myers does not play, Davante Adams is still a stud. He is still phenomenal. He's still one of the best receivers in the entire NFL. I know he's kind of gone out to Vegas, and you had everything that happened last year with Derek Carr not hitting those proper expectations. Now Jimmy G is there. He's never been known as a guy who has been a top-tier QB. Can he sustain Davante Adams? Adams is still phenomenal. He's still sick. One of the best route runners, one of the best receivers in terms of setting up defensive backs and making them think he's going to do A when really he's a liar and he's going to do B. Sharp, crisp, sudden, decisive routes. He is still a problem. But If Myers isn't there, you can shade to him a little bit more, and there's less of a threat. Hunter Renfrow is there. No real productivity at all to speak of in week one. McDaniels talked about it, saying it was just a game script in a game that didn't really involve Renfrow. He was on the field for some snaps. I don't even think he was targeted. And again, not a ton of completions, not a ton of attempts for Jimmy G. Why? Because they do want to run the ball. I want to pull this comment here from Kendall, which is fantastic. Kendall says the Raiders had 2 or more running backs on the field on 45.5% of snaps in week one. That is the second highest rate, behind only San Francisco. So 2 or more running backs on the field, 45.5% of their snaps in week one. And again, when you're looking at those backs, Josh Jacobs, Jakob Johnson, power run, downhill, coming at you. Johnson is an absolute hammer. That also ties into what happened to the Bills against the Jets. So this run game for the Raiders, it's going to test the Bills' tackling and their run fits. The tackling was poor against the Jets at the line of scrimmage, at the second level, at the third level. It was not good. The Raiders, like I mentioned, they want to run downhill at you. They want to create vertical displacement, and they want to let Jacobs eat. They're going to run a variety of gap and zone, and with the skill set, Jacobs, the goal is to get more north than south than it is to get east and west. What the Bills did in week one against the Jets, when the Jets went with heavier looks, their base personnel answer was not to bring in a third linebacker like we talked about earlier. They brought in Taylor Rapp to be that kind of third linebacker. So Taron Johnson came out, and then you had at the second level, Matt Milano, Terrell Bernard, Taylor Rapp. It's going to be challenging for that linebacker group to match and mash against Jakob Johnson in the run game. Again, Johnson is huge. He's a mauler. He's physical. He comes from that New England scheme and that time in New England. He was a priority for McDaniels coming over to the Raiders and bringing him in with him. He just fits their scheme and their style. This is an old school pound the football type of offense. And then they're going to go play action off of that. And they're going to hit those in breakers, and they're going to attack the middle of the field. And they want to keep Jimmy G on schedule, ahead of schedule, in rhythm, on time, all of those pieces. I don't think the Bills' run fits were holistically as bad as they're being blown up to be in week one against the Jets. They weren't great, but they did have opportunities. Trey White has to make a tackle on that 80-yard run by Breece Hall. Leonard Floyd has to make the tackle on that 26-yard run. There were guys in positions to make plays, and they just didn't make the tackles. Not that their run fits were perfect, but you got to make tackles. But again, their tackling overall and their run fits will be challenged in this game because of the style of offense the Raiders are going to run. I expect the Raiders, especially if Jacoby Myers is out, they're going to lean even more so. Again, like Kendall said, even with Myers being available, again, the Raiders had 2 or more running backs on the field, 45.5% of the snaps in week one. That was the second highest rate in the league. And even if, forget where it was in terms of like second highest first, although second is a lot, basically 50% of the snaps, they had 2 or more running backs on the field. That is almost unheard of in today's NFL. And it's not just because the Niners did it at the highest rate in week one, but one of those, running backs technically is Kyle Juszczyk, and he's a matchup nightmare and a chess piece because of his physicality, his blocking, and his receiving ability. Kyle Shanahan loves to use him as a matchup creator for the 49ers offense. It's not that way with the Raiders. Jakob Johnson isn't some jack of all trades fullback. He's a straight up old school fullback who's going to mash you, come downhill, and create problems. And so if the Bills choose to match that with their heavier defensive personnel package, meaning Taylor Rapp comes in for Taron Johnson, you got Rapp, you got Bernard, you got Milano. Milano is the biggest linebacker at the second level for the Bills, and he's not really a masher. He's not the biggest, run stuffer kind of dude. He's a slasher. He's a gap shooter. So is Bernard, and so is Rapp. We'll see how they match up against, a physical, strong Raiders offensive line, and then paired with that downhill running attack with a physical mashing hammer type of fullback in Jakob Johnson. That's going to be a key piece and key component as well. Can the Bills stop the run this week? That's where everything's going to stem from. That's what the Raiders want to do. That's where they want to live. They want to run with Josh Jacobs. They want to run downhill. They want to go play action. They want to attack the middle of the field. They want in breakers, and they want to get the ball in their playmakers' hands and let them attack and let them eat and keep Jimmy G on schedule. And the way to do that for them is to start with the run. If they can, they'll run the ball. If they have 70 snaps, they'll run the ball 70 times out of 70 times. That's what they will do. They will run downhill at you. If they're averaging 6 and 7 yards a pop, they're just going to keep going to it. Yeah, they'll check to a pass and take advantage of Adams' one-on-one, or if they have a look that's advantageous, and they'll work in play action. They have no problem just living in the run and running it down your throats. Jimmy G is comfortable with that. Josh McDaniels is comfortable with that. Josh Jacobs is definitely comfortable with that. They got some dudes when it comes to designing the run game and then attacking in the run game. The way the Bills tackling and run fits were in week one, a little suspect, a little questionable. That'll definitely be tested in week two. And if I'm the Raiders, I'm trying to put their DB, specifically Trey White, in conflict when it comes to being a run defender. He missed multiple tackles, including that big one on Breece Hall. I'm making him have to tackle Josh Jacobs. I'm going to set up those runs, and I'm going to crack down on the edges and the linebackers and the safeties, and I'm going to make Josh Jacobs' man be Tre'Davious White. And I'm going to say, hey, cool, Trey White, you're one-on-one with Josh Jacobs. Can you tackle him? And Jacobs isn't going to try and shake him. He's not going to try and juke him, although he has some elusivity to his game. But he's going to try and shake enough that he can create an arm tackle and then try and just run through Tre'Davious White from an arm tackle perspective. Or maybe he just puts his head down and tries to truck him and maybe trips over his carcass or something like that. But you're going to see them put the Bills in disadvantageous run situations and try to establish the run early and often and then lean into it throughout the entirety of the game. That's also where getting out to a lead against the Raiders helps you from a Raiders offensive standpoint if you're the Bills defense, because if the Raiders get down, do they have to abandon the run? When do they abandon the run? Now they're living in a spread world, in a pass-heavy world, which is not where they want to be. It doesn't lend itself to their quick game and their quick hitters and timing and space and rhythm and their play action and the downhill run piece. You can kind of get them off script and get them out of their comfort zone by getting ahead of them and then having the ability to just rush Jimmy G left and right. I think the Bills have the advantage from a pass rush versus pass protection standpoint on the offensive, on the defensive side against the Raiders offense. So we'll see how that ties in as well. Want to give a shout out to the sponsor. I always bring it up at different points in the episode. One Pie Pizza, the best pizza in Buffalo, New York, hands down. If you live in the Buffalo area or you ever visit Western New York, get yourself some One Pie Pizza. Online menu is found in the episode show notes, whether here on YouTube or any one of the podcasting apps or platforms you are listening to this show on. Delicious sweet sauce pie, cup and char pepperoni. When you get different toppings, they chop them up. Like you get veggies and stuff, they'll chop them up evenly and dice them up and then sprinkle it up evenly across the whole pie. They make their own homemade blue cheese, which is phenomenal. And they do a lot of good for the community in the city of Buffalo, partnering with Roswell, Toys for Tots, the SPCA, the Alzheimer's Foundation, and Fund. They give back in a multitude of ways. So anytime you get some One Pie Pizza, you're doing your taste buds some good, but you're also doing the community and potentially the world some good. So really good pizza, really good food made by really good people. Go get yourself some One Pie Pizza ASAP. And with that happening, I'm going to throw up the banner that says Toodles, folks. Before anybody leaves, please, 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 and thank you, drop a like on this video. Oh, that's awesome. We got a Raiders fan here. Raiders fan, but great show, bro. Very insightful. I appreciate you being here and for the kind words. That's awesome. I normally don't, I kind of violated my own rule. I don't pull up positive comments about myself because I think it's kind of corny. But I appreciate you being a Raiders fan. And it kind of, I just on impulse was like, oh, that's sweet, a Raiders fan. Thank you very much. I appreciate you. Before anybody leaves, please, 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 and thank you. Drop a like on this video. Like I mentioned earlier, I know it's corny to shill out and ask for likes, but they are the lifeblood of these streams and significantly impacting the algorithm. So if you haven't already, please, 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 and thank you. Drop a like on this video. It is greatly appreciated and helps myself and the entire team to track and trend in front of more eyes. This is suddenly, I don't want to say an important game for the Bills, but it's one that they could win. It's one they should win, but they also should have won against the Jets Monday night, especially once Aaron Rodgers went down and Zach Wilson was the guy in the game. The Raiders still have some very interesting pieces. I'm very interested to see whether or not Jacoby Myers plays, especially because he is on my fantasy team. He had a great week one. The Raiders can do some fun things on the offensive side of the ball. I'm a little bit old school, I guess, with my nature. Like I like teams that play good defense and teams that run the ball. I don't think the Raiders necessarily play good defense or great defense, but Maxx Crosby is a stud and is so fun to watch. Like Maxx Crosby is so fun to watch that even if he destroys the Bills offense, like I wouldn't be upset because he's just such a fun player to watch. The technicality, the violence, not to mention too, what he's overcome and his story and his journey and how he's grown to become the player and person that he is. Dude is just A1 across the board on and off the field now. So Crosby is an absolute difference maker in a huge way. Like I mentioned earlier, arguably the most underrated player in the entire NFL. Based on how I define it. So Crosby's a stud. And then offensively, they're not going to set the world on fire. Davante Adams is still a stud. You still got to find a way to cover Davante Adams. And then given the personnel groupings and the style of offense they lean into, they can pose some problems, specifically for a team like the Bills, who are built to stop the pass, who like to live in nickel and or big nickel. Cool. Can you mash against Jakob Johnson? Is Taron Johnson or Taylor Rapp or Terrell Bernard or Matt Milano going to be able to fill against Jakob Johnson? Because Johnson's that much of a hammer with his size and frame that he's going to maul and mash your second level and third level dudes, but he's also big enough and physical enough that he can kick out your edges. Even Gregory Rousseau, but Epinesa, Leonard Floyd, he's going to mash, and that's a potential matchup advantage. And in a day and age where most teams are built to stop the pass, you've got these teams that are more old school in their nature, especially the teams that run downhill and don't live on this wide zone scheme or outside zone scheme. So the Raiders can present some matchup problems. It'll be a fun game and one that the Bills can win, should win. And I don't want to say need to win, but if you start off the year 0-2 with a deflating loss against the Jets and then your home opener lose to the Raiders, who may be without Jacoby Myers, that'll be definitely disappointing for the Bills. And again, that Jacoby Myers domino, I think, is significant. If they're just running 2 wide receiver sets, you got real quality receivers with Devontae and Jacoby Myers. But then if Myers is out, they're already a team that's living in a heavy personnel world. Do they lean into that even further? And that could significantly impact the schematic components of this game. So we'll see what happens going forward from there as well. Drop a like on this video. If you have not already, please subscribe to Disguise Coverage here on YouTube. Or if you're listening on one of the podcasting apps or platforms, please subscribe to Disguise Coverage there, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Even if you're never going to listen again, just subscribe because it helps. I appreciate you. Feedback is always tremendously appreciated as well. So whether it's real and constructive or, just positive, kind words, whatever you got. So Apple Podcasts, Spotify, rate and review and subscribe, please. And thank you. Here on YouTube, feel free to drop a comment on the video once we finish up here. Any questions, thoughts, final comments, concerns, anything you got. If you had something that I did not get to in this episode or I did not see, I apologize. Add me on Twitter at pro__ant. That's pro 2_ANT. Give me a follow on the old Twitter. DM me, message me, questions, thoughts, comments, concerns, anything you got. If I didn't answer anything on the show, so feel free to get at me on YouTube or on Twitter that way. I appreciate everybody who joined me live for this episode. Again, no guest. Had a couple of guests lined up, one in particular, but things just weren't in the cards. Some things went sideways at the last minute here on this episode. So I ended up riding solo on this one. So thank you to everybody who joined me live. I appreciate you making me feel like I'm not alone. Thank you for the engagement, the back and forth with one another, and the engagement with myself. Thank you to Jason. Thank you to Carl. Thank you to Jonathan for the super chats. I appreciate you folks being here in general, but having the monetary donation on top of it means a lot. So thank you very much for that. If you did not watch live and you are watching later, listening later, whatever have you, thank you very much for your post live view, listen, download, whatever have you. I appreciate the support that comes from you folks in every form and fashion that it comes in. So thank you very much for the kind words that rolled throughout the show, especially at the end here. Thank you to the Raiders fans who stopped by. I appreciate the kind words in that regard. And again, thank you to everybody who joined live, watched later, listened later, whatever have you. I appreciate you folks more than you will possibly know. Thank you for the support in whatever form or fashion that it comes in. If you enjoyed this show, tell your family and friends and loved ones about how awesome it is, the insight, the knowledge, the play breakdowns, anything and everything. Join myself and Eric Turner live tomorrow night, Wednesday, September 13th at 7 p.m. Eastern for the Cover One Film Room, where we'll be breaking down a lot of significant components and pieces from Bills versus Jets in week 1 with film. That's why I didn't want to dive into too much film on that aspect of it in tonight's episode. And that'll do it for us here. I'll see you next week, Tuesday, September 19th, for another episode of Disguise Coverage at 9 p.m. Eastern. Until then, I hope you and your family and friends and loved ones are all doing well and staying safe. Be kind to one another. Take care of one another. I appreciate you folks more than you will possibly know. I will see you tomorrow for an episode of the Cover One Film Room, and next week live for another episode of Disguise Coverage. And until then, Godspeed,